Do you ever see a successful woman on your feed or in a magazine and think, wow, it must be nice to have it so easy? Well, think again. Behind that glossy cover or smiling face is a ton of hard work, countless failures, and endless learning experiences. I'm Rebecca Minkoff, and I'm here to tell you that success isn't a walk in the park. It takes grit, resilience, and a willingness to take risks. That's why I created Superwomen, a podcast that peels back the varnish and gets into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to make it as a woman in today's world. From luminaries and game changers to women you've never heard of but should, this podcast is here to inspire you to take your next leap, no matter how daunting it may seem. We'll explore the sacrifices these women have made, the highs and lows they've experienced, and the lessons they've learned along the way. So if you're ready to be inspired and learn from some of the most successful women out there, join me on Superwomen. Together, we'll uncover the stories behind the successes and prove that with hard work, determination, and a little bit of luck, anything is possible. Hey everyone, you're listening to Superwomen. Today's guest is Rosa Li, the founder of Wildwonder, the world's first sparkling prebiotic and probiotic beverage. Her flavors are inspired by heritage and taste like a California produce stand. Her grandmother was her original inspiration point for launching this good for you brand, and she's since gone after the beverage market in a way where she's sold in over 5,000 stores. And she started from nothing. Bootstrapping, stocking packers, and beverage bros, she's built an incredible business. Take a listen. Rosa, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to talk about Wildwonder.
Thanks for having me, Rebecca.
Before we started recording, you mentioned the brand was inspired by your grandmother's tonics. So I'd love to start in your childhood and what that was like seeing your grandmother make these things and who was she making them for?
Yeah, definitely. So my grandparents actually raised me for the first 12 years of my life while my parents immigrated to the States. So I got really close to my grandmother. She always greeted me with a cup of tea whenever I came back from school or playing outside. So she really taught me the philosophy of food as medicine growing up. She used to brew these tonics with just a symphony of wild botanicals and herbs. And to be honest, I don't know what she put in all of them. Sometimes it's, hibiscus, honeysuckle, all sorts of herbs I can't name. Elderberry is something that I really loved. But most of her tonics didn't really taste that good. So I don't think I really appreciated them at the time. But they always calmed me. They always lifted my spirit. It's just a family tradition that's passed down. So I feel like a lot of these food companies start with a grandma story, and these herbs and traditions just have so much benefits and centuries of wisdom that were passed down. So that's how it all started. And I definitely did not think I was going to start a beverage company growing up, but basically, fast forward to growing up me, I worked a lot of stressful jobs. I started my career in finance and investing, traveled a lot. And at one point, I went to the doctor's office and he said, "You're the first woman who over-reported her weight by 15 pounds. And I was like, why would I ever do that? And I started looking into my health, and I was definitely very stressed. I was having digestive issues. I wasn't sleeping well. And I looked into gut health and really just became a true believer. So after business school, I went to Stanford, which always taught people how to really taught people to be entrepreneurial, change organizations, change the world, and decided to try something on my own. And, people always talk about product market fit. And I think there's also something to be said about product market founder fit. And I'm just a huge foodie. I don't believe in giving up taste for health. I was very passionate about bringing these heritage inspired and gut healthy ingredients to the masses. So decided to launch a beverage business to really bring these centuries of wisdom and something delicious to the mainstream consumer. And I'm just personally very passionate about the food industry. I'm always tinkering with food and beverage in my kitchen. I mean, these drinks started as recipes I made in my kitchen. Just launched it. And unfortunately, it was right around COVID. So great timing on my part.
So you go from some tinkering on these recipes in your kitchen. How do you then get into where do you go to bottle it? How does the recipe stay consistent? And I also know from a friend who has a beverage company that this is definitely a boys' club. So how did you penetrate that, not only as a woman, but a woman of color and with the background that you have?
Yeah, I mean, you were right on target and touched on all the challenges I had. Gosh, where do I start? I would say it's very broy. I think beverage among all food categories, and I talk about this with my team too, is extremely broy. And you see all these dudes stocking retail shelves, and it's hard to break into. I would say I definitely got a lot of rejections at the beginning. It was extremely hard to find a co-packer or anyone who wanted to work with me with no prior experience in the food industry. I honestly had no idea how to start. I mean, I think it's smart for a lot of people to work at a specific company in a specific industry to like, learn the ropes. I didn't do that. I just jumped right in because I was naive and passionate. And so what happened at first was I was brewing these tonics in my kitchen, and I share the recipes with a chef at Square. So I live in San Francisco. There's a ton of very health conscious tech companies that offer delicious snacks, food to their employees, and they really are at the forefront of pushing health and wellness and sharing better for you food with people. So I basically brought my drinks to the chefs and they loved them. And they invited me to this sampling fair. And I think it's either a Square or Uber, one of the companies. And it's all these companies, all these brands you've heard of, like Cliff Bar, large brands that are proven in the market, sold all over the country. And I did not have a product at the time. I just had drinks I made in the kitchen. So I bought these swing top bottles from Amazon and made the drinks in my kitchen. I hand labeled one bottle just so it looks legit. And basically the way it worked is all the employees would come and taste all the products. They would vote on what they want stocked in their kitchen. So then they voted for me, and that's the beginning of Wildwonder. And then at the time, I was freaking out because I obviously couldn't make all the drinks in my kitchen and send them to Square. So I was finding co-packers around San Francisco. I found a co-packer in Sonoma and basically cornered the owner until he gave me the answer I wanted to hear was, yes, I will produce the product for you. Because they were basically avoiding my calls, avoiding my emails. I mean, why wouldn't they? Because I had nothing and I didn't really have a brand. But I finally figured out when he's showing up to the manufacturing facility. I just waited for him to show up and I had him try my drinks. He loved them and he said, okay, I will give you 1 day to produce. You will produce after another customer who happened to have the same bottle, so they don't have to change the line. So he was like, do you want to take it? And I'm like, yes. And I figured out how to find the suppliers, how to convince everyone to work with me to make this very first batch. And that's when we produced basically the first purchase order for the tech companies. And I was super excited to ship the orders to them. And then COVID happened and entire industry shut down. So, but that was a very exciting story of, just learning how to manufacture and take a recipe from my kitchen to a very large scale.
When you approached him and he basically thought maybe there's a woman stalker at my what gave you the bravery to do that and to sit there and stand in front of him? Because I think a lot of women experience this moment of like, well, I can't do that. That's going too far. I've learned to push past that feeling. I ask for uncomfortable things to this day. But what gave you that initial confidence to be like, nope, I'm standing here. I know when he's arriving. I know what he looks like. And this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I didn't really think that hard about it at the time. I'm very stubborn. If there's anything I know about myself, I know I'm very resilient. And I think my grandmother really taught me that is to be really resourceful, to be resilient, to go after what I want. And I really wanted this beverage to happen. And it's not so much about the beverage itself. I think there's so much more to the brand that is really my North Star. And it's really bringing these heritage inspired and grandma inspired recipes to the world. It's bringing more unique flavors and representation to the space. So I would say that really drove me beyond just making a can of product. So yeah, I mean, I basically just kept going. I didn't think that, failure is an issue or even an option. So I just want it to happen, and I would do whatever it takes to make something happen if that's something I really want. It's definitely not without challenges. I definitely ran into a lot of no's. There's a ton of co-packers during my research that said no to me. And I even talked to a lot of people who have been in the food industry who were gracious enough to give me the time of day and share some lessons. And a lot of those people actually told me, like, don't do a beverage. Don't be stupid. Like, you are offering something that everyone produces. You are going to a very crowded industry. Like, no one's going to want to work with you. It's going to take a ton of time and money and resources to build what you want to build. And basically, no one really believed that this was going to happen. I'm just very good at proving people wrong. I love doing it. So part of that is stubbornness. But it's also just, maybe I wanted to prove it to myself that I could make this happen. So yeah, I just kept going back. I just kept going back to the same suppliers, the same co-packer. And I think at some point, someone realized, wow,
He's not going away.
Really wants to make this happen. There's probably something here.
Yeah. So originally you said COVID was bad for you, but I would assume that it would be good in terms of people are captive at home. They can only drink so much alcohol. They're sick of their coffee and their tea that they're making. So did it end up being good for you in the end?
So it's very interesting. The way that the space shifted, the way consumers responded to COVID and after COVID, I would say at first it's very bad because there's a few things that happened. One, supply chain completely shut down. And you probably remember going to the grocery store and nothing was on shelf because we just couldn't really, well, one is like shipping and freight broke down, sea freight broke down, and if people got sick and then they couldn't produce because the manufacturing facility was shut down. So the supply chain was completely broken. There's a lot of out of stocks on raw materials that we were using to produce the product. So, cans were also in shortage. Aluminum cans were also in shortage. So from that perspective, it was very challenging. And certain channels I was targeting, actually, when I first started, I didn't want to do retail. I didn't want to do online because, first of all, why would I ship liquid across a country that's very expensive? And who would purchase bottles? When I first started, I started with glass bottles and then converted to cans. But who will purchase glass bottles online and have them shipped to the home? And then the other retail is very expensive because you have to pay slotting, you have to get a huge team together. So I specifically decided to go after the food service industry, which is primarily for me office pantry. So I was stocking the Googles and the Metas and LinkedIn's of the world. And I thought it was so smart in going after these channels because no one was doing it. Everyone's going after retail. And these channels are almost like an arbitrage opportunity where it's huge volume. You don't have to do marketing. It's actually providing marketing for me. And it's just cash flow right away because I bootstrapped at first and I just really needed cash flow to work. And I had these large POs going out to these offices. And I was so excited. So this week is the largest natural products expo, the largest trade show in the industry. I'm actually flying down there tomorrow in Anaheim. So this is exactly the time I launched 5 years ago.
Wow.
And this week, I drove my entire booth down there 5 years ago. And I was so excited to launch. And I got there and we had a pandemic. So the entire place was shut down. I drove back up to San Francisco and just said, well, I guess I have to launch another way. And all my POs were canceled. So I produced a product. I had no way to sell it. I had no customers, no revenue. So it was very much a crisis moment. when I had to figure out, well, I don't really have a business anymore, what channel do I go into? Instead of selling to Google, maybe I should just get a job at Google and that would pay the bills. But something in me really wanted to push forward. So during COVID, when everyone was sheltering at home and quarantining at home, I basically put all the drinks in my car and I just drove around San Francisco. I went to all the independent grocery stores and I just sold door to door. I made friends with all the grocery store managers and helped them stock the shelves so they could talk to me while I was selling my products and as a favor. That's how it happened. I think by the end of year one, we were in 100 stores, all in San Francisco, including our local Whole Foods. And within the first 3 months of launch, because I was trying to make cash flow work, I decided to also open up the online channel because that's the only way people could make money, the only way people were purchasing products. So to your question, was it good or bad? I would say it was bad at first. It was very bad, but we were able to make it work. I had one employee at a time, and he and I just put our heads down, really focus on cash flow. We were able to basically reroute some of the revenue going to food service to our online channel. So I basically reached out to all my customers, the office customers, and said, hey, I could ship these drinks to employees' homes. And as a care package, would you want to still buy them? And that's how I started online channel. And then I sold into grocery stores. I basically visited 300 stores within the first 3 months. So it's very, very much like doing everything I could to make the business work.
Become fearless and focused in pursuit of your dreams. In my book, Fearless, The New Rules for Unlocking Creativity, Courage, and Success, now available in paperback, I share personal stories and practical advice I've learned along the way in pursuit of my own, in fashion world and in my personal life. I talk about how persistence and courage have been the keys to my success. I share my journey of building a company and the challenges I've faced along the way. By refusing to give up and constantly stepping out of my comfort zone, I was able to break through the unspoken rules that have held women back for far too long. My hope through writing this book is to encourage you to face your own fears and take risks when going for your own goals. Fearlessness is a choice, and we all have the power to make it. The book is now available in paperback, including updated content and a new bonus chapter. I want to underline everything you just said, because I think people think entrepreneurship is sexy and you don't have to work that hard sometimes. But when you're in launch mode or grow, starting a business mode, you just said it. You went to these stores, you stalked the owners, you stalked the shelves. You continued to innovate when people could have said, oh, Google, whatever. But then you went back and said, here's a care package for you to send to all your employees. And so I think the fact that you were able to keep pivoting and keep swerving around every obstacle is why you're here today. I'm curious, you're 5 years in, how are your challenges different today? And do you have an example of a challenge today that you're in the middle of beating down? Because I have no doubt you're probably not giving up.
There's plenty of challenges. I don't even know where to start. I would say the challenges are definitely different in nature just because I have a great team now. I am so grateful to my team. And everyone talks about it takes a village to raise a family. It takes a village to build a company. So, we still have similar issues to before, like our truck breaks down, our drinks got lost, but our team's taking care of it. I'm thinking more about our North Star is to bring more unique flavors and representation to retail shelves, to the mainstream, bring these heritage-inspired products to the masses and tell our story. Then how do we expand when we're constantly under-resourced? I mean, you mentioned, female founders, minority founders don't get as much funding. Well, no one's getting much funding these days, actually, because the market is just terrible. And running a profitable company and competing against all these big players with a ton of cash throwing around for marketing, for sales is extremely challenging. So we have to be very creative. We have to really make sure that, our product just turn better, we run operations more efficiently. We really focus on our core competency and really expand and compete against other people who just have way more resources. So I would say, I take a lot of pride in my team and the way we operate. We have a culture of being very creative, very resourceful, but it's still challenging. Sometimes just some extra cash would definitely make, take us further and maybe pay for some additional distribution. So we basically have to rely on different things to expand, and that's not without challenges, especially in this market.
Do you think that being one of probably, I would say, under 10 women in the beverage space helps because you guys are considered more rare and unique, or hurts? And you wish there was more women in bev?
Yeah, that's a good question because I do think about how broy this industry is. I don't think being a woman in beverage necessarily like helps or hurts. I do think being a woman in running a company, there's certain advantages to that. And I would say because, we tend to be under-resourced, we learn to be very, I would say we adapt to different environments faster. We learn to be very efficient. We learn to generate better returns on our investment because that's just the cards we're dealt with, and we have to make it work in a certain way. So in that sense, I would say we end up building more sustainable companies. We don't need to rely on outside funding to make it work. We just make it work. So, it's kind of, there's, I would say there's definitely benefits. There's also the similarity attraction that people always talk about when it comes to fundraising, when it comes to building relationships in the industry. If there's just more people who are similar to me, I do think that would help because it's easier to build trust that way. So I do wonder, I don't know, I've never A/B tested this because I am a woman. I was never really, I can't tell what the other side looks like. But because there's a lot of men in the industry, maybe it's easier to build relationships. Maybe it's easier to sign contract if I were a man. We don't know.
We'll never know, right? Not this lifetime.
Yeah.
I do want to touch on and go back. You said something, your grandmother and your grandfather raised you for your first 12 years of life while your parents were immigrating here. And the minute you said that, I thought about the fact that I feel guilty because I'm not with my kids, a couple nights a week. Here you are being raised by your grandparents. How has that shaped your approach in life and business? And then when your parents did come, did you then take different learnings from maybe them that you wouldn't have necessarily because they, being that your grandmother raised you?
Gosh, I am super grateful for my upbringing. And I would say, do I wish my parents were around? Of course. I think my grandparents just had a different way of parenting because my grandmother really just made sure I was sheltered well, I'm healthy, I'm fed well. She didn't have a formal education, so she didn't really think about raising me in a way maybe a lot of parents raise kids today, is with all these activities and exposures. So what that taught me was to be very independent and very curious and actually be resourceful. I had all the freedom in the world to figure out what I wanted to do with my time. It wasn't fed to me. So ended up pursuing different interests because I was just curious. I whenever I wanted to go to an art class, my friends are doing, I would figure out how to sign up. I would figure out my own transportation. Maybe I would ask my friends' parents for favors. So in a way, I think it actually prepared me for entrepreneurship way better if everything was fed to me, because it taught me to be resourceful, resilient. It taught me to chase after what I'm curious about. So I actually really appreciate the freedom, but I wish things were easier? Of course, but you also don't know, again, like what the flip side would look like. My parents came here because, they're immigrants. They didn't know if they could make it. So they just came here for grad school while I stayed behind with my grandparents. So I have no idea what life would have been like had I grown up with them.
I think though, the fact that when you said a couple of those things, like you had to figure stuff out, I was brought up the same way. Like my mom was like, figure it out. And it's just a better breeding ground for an entrepreneur, basically, if that's the case, because you have to be resourceful and know how to figure things out and know what you don't know. And you only learn that by having the word no thrown at you, or I'm not doing this. Which
100%.
makes a huge difference. Um, so before we wrap, I have 3 questions for you. The first one being, what would we be surprised to know about you? Could be personal, professional, fun habits.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people who work with me, even my friends, think I'm hyper rational. My team thinks I'm hyper rational just because I'm always very even keeled whenever there's a crisis. I don't get emotional, but I'm actually a very emotional creature. I cry in every movie I watch. Um, I used to. I don't watch movies anymore because I don't have time to watch all the movies. But I used to be very embarrassed to go to the theater with my friends because at some point I would start sobbing. And I used to be, yeah. And when I started my career in finance and investing. And sometimes I would go to the bathroom and cry. And I used to think I would not ever get promoted. The hedge fund managers would tell me, you can't be emotional when it comes to investing. So yeah, I used to be embarrassed about that. And now I learned to actually lean into my emotions. And then obviously we all learn about the power of vulnerability by Brene Brown. And I think there is something to be said about emotional intelligence. How do I actually use that as an asset in authentic leadership? And it's something that I actually take pride in, is that I have the empathy, I have the emotional intelligence to understand people and work with them in ways that maybe men who are hyper rational don't have the emotional bandwidth or range to do that.
I love that. I love that. I too don't really get emotional in business, and people are like, "Why are you so calm?" They think it doesn't hit you as hard because you're not emotional, and I still feel like then they just think you either don't care or that it's not affecting you. I'm like, it can affect you without you being emotional, which
Right. Totally.
um all right, next question is, any piece of advice you'd like to pass on that you either learned the hard way or someone gave to you that was helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I learned so much in the last many years of building this business. I would say the one that pops up now is um, ask for help. I think growing up, I was taught to be independent. I was taught to be self-sufficient. I think that's partially cultural. I guess in the Asian culture, we learn how to be, just self-sufficient, don't ask for help. As immigrants, I learned to do that. But again, it takes a village to build a company. So I've learned to also ask for help. In the years of building this business, I would not be able to do this, would not be where I am today without the community that supported me. So I think learning to ask questions and learning to ask for help is very crucial in building and, succeeding in life.
I love that. I love that.
One thing I'm really excited about is that we just got national distribution with Whole Foods. So people can find Wildwonder across the country now. When I first started, I was very geographically, regionally focused because I wanted to build efficiently and very strategically. And we're ready for national distribution now that we build a great brand. So we are more accessible across the country. And we're also launching a brand new flavor that I'm super excited about in collaboration with another women-owned, API-owned brand. So that's coming out closer to the summertime.
Oh my gosh, that sounds fantastic. And I'm excited.
Thank you.
Congratulations. That is no easy feat. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today. And I'm excited to meet you next week.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Yeah, I'm so excited about your event and the dinner.
I just wanted to thank you guys for listening to today's episode. I also want to ask you to rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts. I know it's a pain in the butt, but it actually helps with search and algorithms. So if you love this podcast, it is an easy way to get it more visible and out there. I also want you to follow me on Instagram at Rebecca Minkoff, at RM Superwomen, and be sure to check out my book, Fearless, The New Rules for Unlocking Creativity, Courage, and Success. Thank you again, and you will hear from me next week.